Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Tool Time with Professor Levy. It's unbelievable that we're this far through the semester already. Tonight we are going to explore making some scenery that is complicated and tricky. It has a whole lot of angles in it. It has a whole lot of facets in it. We're making the stalagmites for our production of Rock the Runway that's coming up, that loads in this coming Tuesday. We are going to explore how I have drafted this scenery a little bit, and then how I take it from the construction drawing that I have produced to being an actual piece of scenery. I'm going to show you what the finished product looks like, and then we're going to go to the drafting. I have two different kinds of stalagmites, and I think this is actually going to change, and they're all going to wind up looking somewhat like these two. So each stalagmite that I'm making is a reverse and repeat of each other. So these two stalagmites right here are exactly the same as each other. They are just a mirror image of each other. The first two stalagmites look a lot better that I showed you than these two. These are the first ones that I produced. The one that we're currently looking at being the very first one that we made. And then over here, I have the second one that we made. These ones we chose not to have an open space. The reason, there was the clear plastic on the first stalagmites that I showed you. We're going to go back to them. Here we go. These have plastic because we're actually going to put a light inside these and shoot the light out so that they can change color during the show. Here I have the construction drafting for the stalagmite that we're going to start making tonight. The top left-hand image on the screen is the plan view of what the object looks like. The dashed lines in this image are hidden lines, so they're lines that you can't see. The first thing that we will do is start by cutting out the base of this object that are these three hidden lines and the black solid line at the back. The image below this is the front view of what this stalagmite is going to look like. Then we have the right side view. And finally, on the top right-hand corner, we have the isometric view of what the object looks like in 3 dimensions. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take the scale ruler and measure what the dimensions of this base are actually going to be. The scaled drafting that we're looking at here is in 3-inch scale. 3 inches equals 1 foot. So I place the scale rule on the page here, and I can see that the base is 9 inches by 11 inches by 10 inches. So it's not a square, obviously, so we will cut a square that is 9 inches by 11 inches and then make a cut to it. I find it really difficult to start the saw where it is so close to the edge of the piece of plywood. It is possible, it's just more delicate and the guard gets caught more easily, so I'm actually going to start from that side cutting this. So the stalagmite that we're drafting is this yellow one over here in the computer. So I'm going to pull some dimensions off of this, and I'm going to sketch what the base looks like. These are really complicated little objects. So if I hit DI in AutoCAD, which is going to give me the bottom measurement, so we're going to call that 1'5". We're going to call that 10 inches. So here's where I've made my little sketch of what the base is going to look like. We're going to leave the top number blank because it's going to be kind of predetermined by the other numbers, and because I also sort of made the numbers up a little bit, it's going to be different than what the computer says. Okay, now I'm going to lay it out correctly this time. Okay, now that I actually have this thing properly laid out, I'm going to go ahead and cut this again. There's a lot more measurements to actually, or not measurements, but a lot more facets to cut on this, but it's going to make it a more interesting object in the end. And making sure that the object is off the table for the cut. See if we can cut this. These last two cuts are a little tricky. So here is a cut where I have to keep the blade guard up. And I'll have to do, no, this one will be easier. Okay, so now I have the facets of the first one drawn. I can go ahead and scribe them onto my second blank. And this pencil is getting dull, so I'm going to re-emphasize these lines. There we go. And I'm actually going to try to cut these on the chop saw. It'll be cleaner. Okay, so I've set up my first angle here on the chop saw. I've got it locked so it doesn't move on me, and we'll cut the first part. I'm gonna have to switch sides for this next cut, which means using my left hand. That'll do. And setting the saw back to 0. And putting it to sleep. Looking at my 3D isometric view of my object here, I am going to pick a side to start cutting the luan for the face of this with. And this side right here is going to be the easiest one to start on. That view is also shown flattened here, but I'm going to take it from the isometric view because it's going to give me the true lengths of the pieces of Luon. I'm going to grab my scale rule again and just give it some dimensions to aid myself here. Once I dimension the first one, it becomes much easier on the next. So this looks like it is 2 foot. I'm going to call this one 2'2". That side is 1'6". This measurement here is this measurement here. So we're actually going to grab our tape measure and we're going to call that 8 and I'll call it 8 3/16. And then we're going to get a measurement on this, which looks like that's going to be 8 inches, and this measurement will be predefined for us. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here is check that this edge is square, which it is. So this is going to be the back side of our piece, and we know that it needs to be 2'2". So I'm going to place a mark up here at 2'2". The next thing we know is that this is 8 3/16. So a measurement at 8 3/16. Then we said 1'6", which is right about there. It is square at the top. So I'm going to take my speed square at 2'2". So then now I know we just need to connect the dots. This is why you need a sharp pencil. With the sharp pencil, I can now connect the dots. And now I have this laid out, so I can now cut this out with the circ saw. And here I have my piece of Luon that is going to be, if we measured it right, this one, and it's going to just slightly lean in. Okay, everybody, so welcome Rakari here. She's going to help me a little bit tonight. What she's going to do now, I cut the Luon blank for the face that we're about to put in. Rakari's going to put a bead of glue on the plywood base, and then using the narrow crown stapler, she is going to staple it to the base right there. So she's going to go ahead and put that bead of glue across it. Yep, and it gets all over the table, and that's what usually happens. And we don't care about that. That's why it's such a messy table. So then you're going to grab the Luon. On one side it's blank, on the other side it's white. We want the white side facing in, so you're going to flip that around. Yep. And then just line it up with that edge there. What you might find is helpful there is to rotate the base so that the Luon is sort of at the edge of the table. Yep, just like that. Inset it just a hair so you can sit the Luon there. And the reason for that is when you grab the narrow crown staple gun, it's going to be easier to actually hit it. So I'm going to come over here and grab the gun for you. Here's the gun. And you're just going to lean it forward some, like into... So we don't want it to be straight up and down. We want it to lean forward like a little bit more even. A little bit more, a little bit more, like about that. And then if it's easier to hold the gun upside down, so rotate it 90 degrees. I will show you. Yep, just like that. And then instead of using your thumb to activate the trigger, use your pinky to activate the trigger. And then, yep, just into there about 5 shots, I'd say. Let me shoot the first one for you, and then now it should be a little bit easier because the thing will want to hold itself in place. And if we don't like its lean, Ricari, we can always push it forward once we're done with it. Okay. So down just a little bit. Yep, perfect. And hit it.
Stop it, he's that strong.
So we have this first piece in here now, and if we don't like its angle later, we're just going to squeeze it in and make it right. What we're going to do now, from now on, the measurements get a little easier because this is the hard and fast measurement. We can zhuzh the rest. So we are going to get a piece of Luan. Ricari, if you want to see that white piece of Luan by the trash can. That looks like it might be perfect. So what I'm going to do here is just set it beside this. And if I can figure out where I hid my pencil. So that's that, and then I'm gonna make a mark there where the facet changes, and then I'm gonna connect that dot with this. So we can move that out of the way. And hopefully that's right. That kind of looks like that.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we have traced the little triangular segment that's going to be our next piece here. So I'm just going to cut this out, test fit it, and then we will put it in place. And then this is going to be the tricky one. I kind of want to do it from this side. Let's see if there's enough wood here to catch the blade guard. What happened there is I was trying to cut the corner of the table off. Okay, let's see how we did. That will work perfect. So I'm not sure how good you can see that. We'll just put a little piece of furring material is what we refer to it as. I'll show you that in a minute. And then staple and glue this in place. So this is what I call furring material. It's just a piece of pine that we've ripped down. I just ripped it to 1 inch. So I'm gonna place our little piece that we just made and line everything up nice and good. And then I'm just gonna create a line there that I'm just gonna cut off at. So I just created a little diagonal line that I'm gonna take to the chop saw and we'll cut that. Okay, so here we are at the chop saw. I'm unable with this saw to cut this angle, but that's actually unimportant. I'm just going to cut it a little bit short of where I made my mark, and it'll fit in where I need it to fit in. If that angle was really important, I would use one of our acute angle jigs that I would clamp to the fence and do it that way, but the angle, these pieces are just holding it together, so it's really unimportant. We're gonna take our piece of plywood that we're putting on and glue it up That's about how much glue I tend to put on something. It's enough so that it covers it pretty well, and doesn't go entirely everywhere, but it's still gonna go everywhere. I like to bring the piece forward on the table so I can get a good shot with the narrow crown. I hold it upside down and use my little finger. And then the fasteners really are just gonna hold this together until the glue dries. The glue is really what's gonna hold this together. So now I'm gonna test fit my piece that I just cut, and that looks pretty good. So again, now I'm gonna glue that up. Just put a bead. We call it a bead. I don't know why they call it a bead. They call it a bead in welding too. When you're welding metal together, the little line that you draw with the welding gun is called a bead. And then I'm gonna attach this to both pieces. I'm keeping my fingers away from where I'm hitting. Even though the staples aren't long enough to go through the material and hurt me, you can still hurt your finger a little bit with the percussive force of the gun. And as I discovered myself the other night, I was shooting one of these together and had swapped the staples in the staple gun, and they were 1.5" staples, not these little 3/4 ones. Fortunately, I keep my fingers away from where I'm shooting, so when it shot through, it didn't hurt me. But if I hadn't, I would have been off to the hospital. And then we're just going to repeat this process as we go around the stalagmite. Now that we have that attached, we're going to go ahead and attach the next facet here. So I've found my piece of scrap Luan that we've already painted white. The reason we've painted it white on the inside is so that it bounces the light easier and is more reflective. So I'm just going to spin it around and lean it against what we've already made. Make sure it's nice and tight and flush. And then I'm going to take a pencil and I'm marking where I want it to stop, just in case it moves a little. So that's that. And then on the inside, which y'all probably can't see very well, I'm just marking where it stops at the bottom, and then it follows a straight line across here. So I'm going to grab a framing square and move that out the way. I'm just going to draw a line across here that's perpendicular to the edge here, and then it needs to come down to there. This is what happens when you have too much on your table. So that's where we're ending. This line, it has a slight angle to it. So let's see what this does for us. So yeah. So now we're going to wander back over to our saw and cut the little bits off that we don't want. So and then our last one, which is always going to be the most difficult. How are we going to approach this cut? So when I get, at this point, I'm not sure how I'm going to cut this, because I'm trying to figure out where to put my hands and for where the blade guard is going to hit the material in a manner that it actually retracts for me. And it seems 9 times out of 10, it means that I have to do it backwards with my left hand. Okay, so we have our piece. Now let's see if it's anywhere close to fitting. And I would say that's perfect in my world. So we've cut our furring strip. I'm just going to test fit it, and it'll work perfect. So I'm going to put glue again on 2 faces and try to not get it all over everything. Okay, and we'll stick it in there and fire it in place. Actually, I'm skipping a step. We should hit it down here. So let's do that first. Okay, so now I'm gonna hit it at the top first. So I'm just gonna make sure my fingers are nowhere near where it's gonna hurt me. Everything looks pretty good. I'm going to wrap the video up here. The steps that are left in completing this stalagmite are what you have watched so far, just with different measurements. And tomorrow we're going to pick this up and complete this stalagmite with the plastic so that we can put the light inside it. Thank you again for watching this episode of Tool Time with Professor Levy, and we will catch you next time.